Wagering and Breeding Law, Section 102, provides that the New York State Gaming Commission shall consist of 7 members, appointed by the governor by and with the advice and consent of the Senate. 4 members being confirmed by the New York State Senate are necessary to afford the commission an ability to establish quorum and undertake action. This present meeting of the commission is now called to order. Ms. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
John Crotty.
Here.
Peter Machete.
Here.
Brian O'Dwyer.
Here.
Christopher Riano.
Here.
Marissa Shorenstein. Here. Jerry Skurnick.
Here.
Ms. Secretary, please have the record reflect that a quorum of qualified members is present, thus enabling the transaction of business. Please also note that this meeting is being conducted by video conferencing in 2 locations. Both locations have been appropriately noticed and accommodate public attendance.
Minutes of the commission meeting conducted on October 3, 2022 have been provided to the members in advance. At this time, I'd like to ask the members if there are any edits, corrections, or amendments. Hearing none. Ms. Secretary, please let the record reflect that the minutes were adopted. The first item of business regards Churchill Downs' purchase of Del Lago. Please recall that this item appeared on our last meeting agenda. At that time, it was removed due to the fact that the record was not complete, and the commissioners did not want to vote on that until such time as we had a complete record in front of us. That record is now complete, and we are able to consider the item for the agenda. I'll call on Mr. Williams.
In February of this year, Churchill Downs Incorporated announced that it had entered into a purchase agreement to acquire substantially all the assets of Peninsula Pacific Entertainment, LLC, for total consideration of $2.485 billion. Functionally, pending regulatory approvals, Churchill was to acquire all of Peninsula's assets in Virginia and New York, as well as certain property in Iowa. With respect to New York, Churchill is to acquire Del Lago Resort and Casino entire. Churchill agreed to step into the shoes of the present licensee and confirm their commitment to the conditions set forth in the license award issued to Lago Resort and Casino, LLC on December 15th, 2015, as amended on October 8th, 2019. Since gaming commenced, ownership of licensees has only structurally changed once, in 2020 when Peninsula purchased the assets of its partner Wilpac Holdings. That transaction was approved pursuant to delegated authority. As this transaction marks a full ownership change, the transfer of the license is presented for commission consideration. The standards for casino licensing suitability are found in New York Racing Parimutuel Wagering and Breeding Law sections 1317 and 1318. Staff also reviewed this financial transaction as Racing Law section 1315.5 requires continued assessment of the capitalization of a gaming facility licensee for the term of its license. In advance of today, each commissioner has been provided with a summary of the New York State Police final investigative report regarding the applicant, its affiliated companies, and principal management personnel. In summary, the New York State Police have found no derogatory information on each. As mentioned, the commission staff also considered whether this transaction would deprive Lago of financial stability pursuant to the standards of Commission Regulation 5301.10B3. Staff reviewed Churchill's capital and financing structure, finding that the debt transactions associated does not deprive Churchill of financial stability. Churchill is a known entity to the Commission or its predecessor agencies, having held video lottery gaming license as a management contractor for Saratoga Harness, and is the owner and operator of Twin Spires, a licensed advanced deposit wagering platform. Additionally, staff has comfort as Churchill Downs Incorporated is traded on the NASDAQ Global Select Market under the symbol CHDN. Staff recommends that the Commission find Churchill Downs Incorporated suitable for gaming facility license pursuant to standards contained in sections 1317 and 1318 of the New York Racing Parimutuel Wagering and Breeding Law.
I'd like to note that Mr. Williams provided me and the commissioners with extensive material in regard to that. I have reviewed it and I'm ready to vote on that. I note that we have Ms. Adams and Mr. Marr from Churchill Downs here today. Ms. Adams, do you have anything you want to say to the commissioners?
Yeah, we're very excited about this deal. We've had the opportunity to visit the property in upstate New York. It certainly is beautiful. It's well run, and we intend to keep that up. I think it's a large part of that community, and it's something we'll be very proud of. So we're looking forward to working with everyone.
Thank you. Do the commissioners have any questions or comments in regard to the thing? Commissioners, all the way upstate? Anything to?
Yeah.
Nothing? Okay.
Nothing.
May I have a motion to find Churchill Downs, Inc. doing business as Lago Resorts and Casino suitable for gaming facility licensing for standards contained within Section 1317-18 of New York Racing, Parimutuel Wagering, and Breeding Law?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda is the exemption from the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority review regarding the use of horsemine for thoroughbreds other than 2-year-olds and those competing in stake races. The next item on the agenda regards an opportunity of the Commission to request an exemption regarding the use of Lasix. I call on Mr. Williams to explain this item to us.
Certainly. Staff seek Commission approval to request an exemption from the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act of 2022 to permit the use of furosemide in horses other than 2-year-old covered horses or covered horses in stakes races. Obtaining this exemption would allow New York Racing to continue under its current rules and practices until the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority issues any recommended changes on the use of furosemide by January 1st, 2026, a date that's been established under the Act. The Act prohibits the administration of any prohibited or otherwise permitted substance to a covered horse within 48 hours of its next racing start, operative as of the effective date of the Horse Racing Anti-Doping and Medication Control Program. The anticipated effective date of this program is January 1st, 2023. For the first 3 years of the Act, a state racing commission may request a Lasix exemption so long as it does not apply to 2-year-old covered horses or covered horses competing in stakes races. An exemption request must specify the applicable state racing commission's requested limitations on the use of furosemide that would apply to within the state during the 3-year period. Such limitations may be no less restrictive on the use and administration of furosemide than the restrictions set forth in the state laws and regulations in effect as of September 20th, 2020. Under the Act, the authority is required to grant the requested exemption and allow the use of furosemide on covered horses in the applicable state in accordance with the requested limitations. Letters have been received from the New York Racing Association, the New York Thoroughbred Horsemen's Association, the Finger Lakes Horsemen Benevolent and Protective Association, and the Finger Lakes Racing Association. All request the Commission timely apply for and request the exemption as to all thoroughbred races conducted in New York for the 3-year period beginning on the program effective date. NYRA and NYSA note that such an exemption would be consistent with the current Commission regulatory protocols, and absent the exemption, New York thoroughbred racing would be placed at a distinct economic and competitive disadvantage with the surrounding states who have or are expected to seek this exemption. A letter was also received Tuesday from the New York Thoroughbred Breeders, Inc., which also supports an exemption.
So the question is whether we want to allow the staff to submit an exemption request to HISA to permit the covered use of furosemide in horses other than 2-year-old covered horses or covered horses in stake races. I have since this is a question really of medical competency, I have asked Mr. Williams to have Dr. Palmer available for us. Unfortunately, he's not here now, but he is on the telephone. Dr. Palmer, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Dr. Palmer, as you well know, is our equine medical director. Dr. Palmer, I have a couple of questions for you, and maybe the commissioners do as well. First of all, do you have an opinion as to whether the commission should seek the LASIK exemption?
Yes, I do. And I believe that the commission should seek the LASIK exemption.
All right, would you give the commission your reasons for so doing?
Well, first of all, there is no more polarizing issue in thoroughbred racing than race day medication used to control exercise-induced pulmonary hemorrhage in the racehorse. The HICA statute requires extensive and contemporary reporting of all medication given to thoroughbred racehorses. It further acknowledges the unique opportunity that this will provide to use this data to definitively investigate the possible benefits and unintended consequences of the treatment of thoroughbred racehorses with LASIK as well as other medications. Now, the best reason I can say to seek this exemption is that this LASIK exemption will enable this critical and unique research opportunity to be realized, and that this research will provide evidence-based recommendations for the medication of racehorses that will improve equine welfare and safety for both horses and riders.
Dr. Palmer, there was a report yesterday that I read that was an article published in the Journal of American Veterinary Medicine that seemed to, that showed that the use of LASIK was associated with the sudden death of racehorses, and that would you like to comment on that article?
Sure, I have read the study in detail, and I do have some reprints for the commissioners as I can get through traffic to get to the meeting. But first of all, my first impression about the study is that it is a very impressive and comprehensive research study that reviewed multiple risk factors associated with sudden death in thoroughbred racehorses. The study population for the study is enormous, including more than 4 million starts by 284,387 horses at 144 racetracks in North America and Canada. The study design and the statistical analysis of the data is appropriate to reach the conclusions found that pre-existing pathology could contribute in some cases of sudden death, and that the association found between furosemide, as LASIK administration, and sudden death prompts further study of a possible causal relationship between the two. Now, as well as this study was designed and conducted, there are always limitations to all research studies that are related to the challenges of study design and the study population. The first limitation of this study is that there's a very low incidence of sudden death in thoroughbred racehorses. Even with the enormous size of the population study, there were still very few cases to actually review. Additionally, the authors point out that there are multiple causes of sudden death and that accurate diagnosis of the cause of sudden death is elusive in many cases, even with a complete necropsy examination. Also, it's important to note that nearly all of the horses in the study, that is 94%, were treated with LASIK before racing, making it a ubiquitous risk factor that was commonly found in both cases in control horses. Finally, it's important to understand that the association with variables in a research study does not necessarily mean causation. Association simply means that knowing the value of one study variable, that in this case LASIK, whether it was given or not, provides information about another variable, that would be sudden death. It does not necessarily imply that one variable causes the other. The most common cause for non-causal association are confounding biases. This means that an outcome, that would be sudden death, can have causes aside from the identified variables that were investigated in the study. For example, Lasix was the only medication investigated as a possible risk factor for sudden death. It is likely that a similar percentage of horses racing in the study received treatment with other commonly administered medications, for example, phenylbutazone, that could be a source of confounding bias. Thyroid hormone, which is a known risk factor for cardiac arrhythmia and sudden death in racehorses, was not included in the analysis. There is no way to determine if some of the horses in the study were treated with thyroid or any other additional medications. All merits and limitations aside from the study, the bottom line is that it was well constructed, well executed, and did find an association between race day administration of Lasix and sudden death in racehorses. The authors approach stopped short of concluding that race day Lasix administration causes sudden death. Rather, they recommend further study designed to control for confounding variables to definitively answer this question. And so that really, in my mind, is a strong endorsement of the Commission's efforts to achieve an exemption so that this Lasix research can continue on a grand scale once the administration of the new program is put in place in January.
Dr. Farmer, you would agree, of course, that one death of a racehorse is one too many.
Of course.
In this regard, is this study, would be your conclusion that this study validates the Commission's seeking of an exemption, and that it will give further opportunity for us to study the effects of the drug?
Exactly.
Can I ask a question?
I was just about to ask
Yes.
Commissioner Crotty.
Thank you. Doctor, how many LASIK studies do you think they've done over the last 2 decades?
Well, there have been a number of them. I can't give you an exact number off the top of my head, but I can tell you the most convincing one was a study done in South Africa, perhaps 10 years ago, that found that Lasix did mitigate the effects of the exercise-induced pulmonary hemorrhage in racehorses.
I mean, we had that.
You may follow up.
Thank you. We had that panel, I don't remember how many years ago, Rob, 6 or 7?
6 or 7.
Yeah, and they went through and they gave examples of, they're waiting for different studies, and they've, what would be, at the end of the day, a conclusive study from your point of view? Because no study's actually been done to prove anything that I know of. Every time they look at it, they say, well, it's not quite conclusive. You got to look at this other factor. Horse has 4 legs. It only affects 3 of them. And they go through the whole scenario. I assume that the veterinarians and the scientists who are doing this are competent and capable people. If they set out to do an exercise, besides the one in South Africa, have any of the other ones actually gotten it right in your mind? One. Number 2, what would be necessary if HIS is going to do this to believe that they will do it right versus all the other flawed studies before this?
Well, keep in mind that no study is perfect and that every study has some limitations. And that's a standard part of the report of a study to list those limitations. And so the way you get to the bottom of an issue like this is to do multiple studies with a slightly different approach. And I can tell you for sure that one of the most exciting possibilities of this potential research with HISA is that they are now requiring contemporary reporting of all medication given to racehorses. Now, this has never been done before. And for that reason, all of the LASIK studies to date have never been able to list all of the medications given to the racehorse in order to determine what ones that can be controlled for to determine whether or not the medications contribute to EIPH or to contribute to sudden death. So the advantage of a study done by HISA would be that they will have a unique database that will include the treatment of every single racehorse in North America, thoroughbred racehorse in North America, and that data will be in a single database that can be mined for information about what medications racehorses are actually being given. And studies can be conducted with a control group and a study group to get to the bottom of these issues that we're struggling with so much. So I do believe that HISA had a unique opportunity because of this database that nobody has ever had access to before, didn't exist. And with that database in place, I think they've got an as good or a better chance of anybody of doing further research to sort this out. I also think that the 3-year period that is in the statute for this research to be completed is a reasonable one. I don't think you can do this kind of work in a year. I don't know that we'll even have the data in a year, but I think at the end of a 3-year period, we will have enough data to do the appropriate studies.
Why not 4?
Well, the statute says 3.
So what?
The federal law.
Statutes get things wrong all the time.
Okay. Well, all I'm saying is what I have.
This is science versus statute, right? That's the question I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure it's science versus statute. It doesn't mean that the research couldn't continue afterwards. It just means that after the 3-year period, HISA is going to review that exemption, and I suppose it could be extended. It'll depend on what they've been able to learn in the meantime. But we do have a 3-year window here to conduct important research. Without this exemption, we're not going to be able to do that.
Is it your sort of opinion that this study then was generally inconclusive from your point of view?
Oh, no, not at all. I think it's very clear that they found an association between LASIK and sudden death. Now, that doesn't mean that LASIK causes sudden death, but it does mean that as you do further research, you can use statistical technology to eliminate confounding bias in the study. And that's what we have here is some degree of confounding bias. It doesn't make the study a terrible study. It's a great study. It just means that it has certain limitations. It pointed out at least 15 risk factors that are in play here. Many of them have nothing to do with medication. So it's a good study. It's a very well done study. And I'm not being at all critical, just pointing out that there are certain stages of any study. And given the ones that they found, these authors recommended do more research in this area to sort this out. And now we will have the ability to do that better than ever before because of the databases that'll be available through HISA. We don't have those databases now.
Dr. Palmer, to follow up Commissioner Crotty, do we have an assurance that HISA is going to do these studies?
Well, they're directed to do them. It's part of their mandate.
It's in federal law.
Okay.
I want to note that the study that we're referencing, there's a copy in the back of your book.
It was one of the studies we were waiting for when we did the LASIK panel 6 years ago, right?
This one?
I thought it was. What was the one we were waiting for? It was 6 years ago. There was another conclusive study coming out that was rendered inconclusive somehow.
I don't recall.
Right, but that Dr. Palmer, which one was that? Do you remember? Peter, you remember?
I don't, John. I don't remember.
But that was
exactly.
quoted, right? That was cited as the reason, right?
We were definitely
There's a
waiting for the
conclusive
results.
study coming out in a year
Yes.
or two.
Yes.
Now no one remembers it. It's worse than the flood study, right? So it just feels like we're back here a lot. I know there's a business angle to this. Yeah, go ahead. Well, excuse me. Defer to the chairman. But
Take over the meeting, John.
no. Absolutely not. No.
Money to
Absolutely
affect
not.
2-year-old racist dumpster
But
donation.
Of course not.
they have a great opinion.
21 were stakes racist.
I'm happy to hear from.
That was faced in over the community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, gentlemen. Mr. O'Rourke wanted. Go ahead.
Thank you, and I actually can empathize with Chairman Commissioner Friday.
Don't scare us here.
The other good-looking Irish was the chairman.
With the frustration that the facts are, in 2019, I assumed the role of president of NYRA, and one of my objectives was race day medication. And NYRA did lead the way on the current format of 2-year-olds and stakes races. And we pushed for that within the industry. However, my opinion is my opinion. Now everything's moved and there's daylight to where this frustration, there is daylight now at the end of these 3 years, but we need to, in my opinion, we need to give the scientists what they're asking for. This is what they've asked for. They'll have 3 years to study. They need right now, unless there's, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, in this, in the ISO regulation, unless it's conclusive that it goes away.
Right. So not only do they have to do a study, the board of HISA has to vote unanimously, or I'm sorry, the safety commission. The safety
Let me just
committee-
interject for a second. It's Joe Applebaum, who's the president of the New York Thoroughbred Horsemen's Association.
So not only are they going to do the study, then the subcommittee of the board, the safety subcommittee of the board, must vote unanimously to keep the current regulation on 5 different topics, subtopics. So there is a very high bar to keep for 3 years from now for LASIX to remain the
I'm
status
sorry,
quo.
what do you mean the current regulation?
So HISA's current regulation, which
Okay.
will start on January 1, okay, is that there's no LASIX use unless a state asks for a waiver, and the waiver can only be asked for in non-2-year-old and non-stakes races. So there will be no LASIX in 2-year-old races and stakes races anywhere in the country. They have essentially copied the rule that NYRA, Dave in particular, put in place. And 3 years ago, I sat in this very same conference room asking for the commission to, I don't know, bless is not
not
the right
pass
word.
it.
To allow you
To
to
allow
undertake that
for us
experiment.
to do that, so.
But for us not to pass that as part of the piece, it was a ministerial thing. It doesn't matter.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
So if the HISA board does not vote unanimously, what happens?
There will be no LASIX use in any race,
Then the existing HISA rule, which says,
correct, that there would be no LASIX in any race at all.
period.
And that's 3 years.
I get it.
But if I could follow up, Dr. Palmer makes the correct point. I've been at this, I've been a fan since, so just so we know, there was no LASIX use in New York before 1992 or 3, Rob? I forget.
95.
5? I was a fan before that, so I remember that. I've been buying and racing horses here for over 20 years, and the contentiousness around this issue has been straight through. David gave us a clear path, and the rest of the nation has followed it. I think we should be proud of that, and it seems that we should be following that kind of path to get that uniformity.
Commissioners, do you have anything? Anybody want to ask questions? Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner.
So to follow up on Mr. O'Rourke, we've had racing without LASIX for 2-year-olds and in stakes races for give or take about 2 years, right? Is it about that time period? Do we have any idea if there's been a negative effect on those horses who have raced without LASIX? I mean, would be a significant number, I would think, in that 2-year period.
Good question.
I would defer that one to Dr. Palmer.
Okay,
Nothing from our perspective.
Dr. Palmer, did you hear the question? Dr. Palmer?
Dr. Palmer, did we lose you?
Why don't I throw out a different question then? One thing that we did see this year was a substantial drop in the number of interests in stakes races. Is there
Correct.
any correlation that you see relative to that?
Well, not every jurisdiction was under the same guidelines, specifically our neighbors.
In,
Jersey, correct?
oh yeah?
Yeah.
New
Did they
Jersey,
see an uptick?
Pennsylvania, Maryland.
So part of the, you mentioned earlier, the economic, we'd be at a severe disadvantage if we were the only.
Rob had said that yesterday.
During the period where we'd also be taking away from the study actually a significant number of data points at the same time.
For anyone, especially any of the commissioners that are new to the commission, or at least newer from 2015, the forum that Commissioner Crotty had discussed was in August of 2015. And the researcher, veterinary, trainer owner, and industry leader panels are all posted in our website in a YouTube fashion.
Apparently, a lot of people got to reflect on our overall intellect to our faces, which was nice.
Dr. Palmer, you're back, are you? Dr. Palmer?
Hello,
Trend continues.
I can hear him.
Dr. Palmer.
Scott, you're muted. No, you're not muted.
I can hear him on your.
Let me call one of these.
My final question, while we wait for the good doctor, is what did Kentucky do? We had talked yesterday
You
about
would
it.
ask me more specifically
More
about
specific.
California.
Well,
Joe?
We would be the only state not applying for the waiver.
Kentucky did?
Kentucky's going to, they're in the process of.
Yeah, okay.
California is.
He said California,
California actually
Florida.
approved it on the 20th.
Right.
We would literally be the only state in
Okay.
the country
Yeah.
who would not be applying.
Okay. They haven't done it yet though, right, Kentucky? We tried looking the other day,
I
we
could
couldn't
text
find
someone and
it.
ask if you'd like me
It'd be
to.
helpful, but if you're sure they're doing it.
I think that'd be,
give my total assurance, but I will text someone.
I think that'd be most
Which
helpful.
number you dial?
The 908.
But other states have. California has, Florida has.
Yes. And in some ways, most importantly to us, New Jersey, Maryland, Pennsylvania,
You could be
Okay.
the
underground.
guys who steal horses from us.
Yeah.
Wait, you might- Mr. Palmer. Or you got pulled over for talking on the spot.
Hello, Lee.
Hey, you're back in.
Is-
Well, I'm standing outside the door. Can I come in?
Definitely better.
Scott, you're over there. Everyone. At the table over here.
Dr. Palmer, it's great to see you in the flesh.
Well, I'm very apologetic at New York City, no construction and traffic. 3 hours is not long enough,
Well,
apparently.
we all know.
You know, doctor, you could have made good money if you'd have bet me once. Say, who was later, me or you?
There was a question on the floor from you, Commissioner. You want to restate it?
Dr. Palmer, how are you? Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Peter.
I had asked, in light of the fact that we've had almost 2 years of racing for 2-year-olds and in stake horses in stake races, no Lasix, right? Lasix-free racing. Whether there's
Right.
been any indication that there's a negative effect, or there was a negative effect on those horses that have raced without Lasix in that 2-year period.
No, there is no evidence of at least any kind of significant or widespread negative effect on the 2-year-olds. None.
And the stakes races the same?
The same.
Seemed to me that's pretty good evidence, although 2 years might be a limited period of time, that horses do all right when they race without Lasix.
I would agree that's an accurate statement from what we've seen so far.
So are we factoring that in our decision to seek an exemption? Because, of course, we have had this discussion, as we've all indicated, for years, right? Going back and forth about trying to, and I think the effort has been, and I think Mr. O'Rourke should be commended for this, to remove race day drugging of horses, right? So what an opportunity New York has now. HISA is going to implement in January this rule that would eliminate Lasix use. So I guess my question to you is, are we factoring in your recommendation, are we factoring in what has happened in the last 2 years? New York kind of led the way, thanks to NYRA, with racing horses without Lasix. It was a great opportunity to see what would happen. It appears that nothing bad has happened, right?
Well, I think if we were operating in a vacuum, that would be accurate. You know, I
Okay.
think that, though, that we're not operating in a vacuum. I think that I've only spoken thus far about the medical study that was recently conducted, but I think that when you take other factors into consideration, like the opportunity to do a nationwide research study, that if we don't get this exemption, we're going to be excluded from that. Also, there are significant issues with the business model in New York versus the other mid-Atlantic states, and that there are other mid-Atlantic states that have requested this exemption, New York and Pennsylvania in particular. And I think that consistency in a region is really, really important. One of the goals of the entire HISA program is national uniformity. And I think that that in this particular instance, the best approach is to take this 3-year exemption and participate in the studies that we can accomplish and not compromise that. At the same time, it represents a level playing field in the Mid-Atlantic region for horses to continue to race in these categories where Lasix can be administered. So I think that on balance, I would support seeking the exemption for reasons other than this recent study that was just done. But because I do believe that we have a unique opportunity in front of us that the risk-benefit ratio of allowing the LASIX versus the harm that could come from it, to me, is not significant. I think the value is great and the risk is minimal.
And I appreciate that, but I guess my question was, are we factoring in what has happened in New York? We did our own, through NYRA, our own experiment, right? We ran horses without LASIX and ran them a number of times, 2-year-olds in stake races, and the result was that we don't have any indication that it had a negative effect on the horses. So are we factoring that in? I don't know what you mean when it would be okay, but it's in a vacuum. I don't know what that means.
What that means is...
I don't know what you mean by that.
What I mean by that is that when we're making this decision, we don't make the decision only on what has happened here in New York. And I think the implications of what happens here in New York are profound in terms of the impact on horse racing in New York and neighboring states. And I think that all those factors have to be taken into consideration when you're making this kind of a decision.
Dr. Palmer, the commission is well able to determine the competitive nature and factor that in. I'm not asking you that, nor are the commissioners. We are asking for your medical advice and medical opinion, not your opinion on the structure of racing. And I would appreciate it if you would confine your opinion to that.
Sure. My medical opinion is that there are many advantages to asking for this exemption for the benefit of the horse that go far beyond the issue of New York racing, and I think that we should participate in it.
Okay. Commissioners? Anybody else? Commissioner Riano? No?
It might be nice as HISA goes along and they actually go forward and start doing this, if you could opine perhaps preemptively on what they said they're going to do, the strategy and the methodology. It'd be better to know there was an issue with the study ahead of it versus after it. I mean, one of these studies by accident has to be conclusive, right?
Well,
I mean, they all seem to have this flaw in it that everyone says, oh, well, you can't look at that, you can't look at this. But, I mean, the trend is pretty clear overall. It just, I understand your point that as a single variable, it might be harder to isolate, but the trend does all seem to be pointing one way, doesn't it?
I think there is a trend going in a good direction that way, yeah. But I also think that science, I disagree with you when you say that these studies are not helping. Every study helps a lot.
I disagree, too. I think that they are helpful. I think they're somewhat conclusive pointing to it. You're the expert, and you're saying, well, there's some issues with what's going on with this study. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seemed like you're saying that study wasn't isolated by itself, so it was harder to sort of say that it was conclusive because there was other factors as part of it.
Study design. It's a study design that's difficult to accomplish in horse racing. You know, and in a controlled study, you test a variable like LASIX and you give it to some horses, you don't give it to others, and then you follow them forward and see what happens to them. And that's been a very difficult thing to accomplish because of regulatory issues and because of horsemen's concerns and animal welfare issues. The LASIX issue is an issue of competing truths. And competing truths are tough things to deal with. There's no right or wrong about this.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Shorenstein, do you have any?
Nope, thank you.
Commissioner Skirna? No. I think we're ready to vote. What I would suggest, because I think everybody wants to vote, if I will call it for a vote, and then I will ask commissioners if they care to explain their vote. Is that okay with everybody?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. At that point in time, the motion is in front of us. Where are we? 5. The motion is to authorize staff to submit an exemption request to the authority to permit the continued use of, how am I supposed to say this?
LASIX.
Well, they say that LASIX. All right. Which is a much easier word than, in horses other than 2-year-old covered horses or covered horse races and stake races. Do I have a second? Well, I don't have a first yet. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Have a second.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I didn't hear you.
Aye.
Aye, okay. Right, now, does anyone want to explain their vote? Commissioner Crowdy, I know does.
Well, I mean, I don't really want to, and I think I've laid out some of the sort of issues that I think are here, you know. Naira's and Joel's, you know, opinion is consequential here. We did attack this the last time. I thought the outcome was good, to have a lot of credibility as it relates to what the steps forward to achieve a better version. I've just always had an issue with what goes on with LASIX. I mean, Nader came back from Hong Kong, Bill Nader, and he went through the thing. Hong Kong does more in handle than all of North America by itself in about a third of the days. And they have very strict policies on LASIX. So from that business perspective, it's hard to rationalize why this is useful. But, you know, we're in a big system. It's a conglomeration of states and different interests. So if this is the way to sort of achieve a better outcome, it seems like a reasonable thing to sort of move forward with. But there are reservations. They have a bill. You have to exempt out of something you're trying to get to. It seems like an odd construction, but if that's where we're going, that's where we're going.
Okay. Anybody else? No? I would like to say that I do this with great reluctance. I'm not convinced, as Commissioner Crowdy, about any of this. However, I've learned that in my life that you have to rely on the experts. And Dr. Palmer is our expert and has asked us to do this. My doctorate is in foreign languages. That's not terribly helpful under the circumstances.
Unless you're talking to Mr. Ed.
So, unless you are talking to Mr. Ed, right? I need to rely on medical opinion. And reluctantly, I have voted yes on this motion. All right.
Perhaps, Mr. Chairman, to your point, we should ask for an update in a year or so from now. Just to see where the report is, to see what's going on. It'd be interesting to know, so we're not at the end of 3 years going, well, what happened there? Does the methodology make sense?
I would like to see the methodology.
Yeah.
I know we can't weigh in on it, but I would like to see what types of questions, how it's being structured.
I can convey that information to members of HISA that I'm comfortable talking about. I think we can get that done.
And I think those.
I appreciate that,
Go ahead.
Dr. Palmer. I think everybody would agree on that point. That I think we'd all like to see something ahead of 3 years.
Absolutely.
I would ask Dr. Palmer to come back to us in a year with a full report on the study and where it's at, and the methodology.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you. All right. I think the next item may be light, a bit more, less controversial. All right. Dr.
Video conferencing, really?
Mr. Williams.
For commission consideration is a resolution that would allow for the use of video conferencing to conduct open meetings under extraordinary circumstances. On April 9th, 2022, Governor Kathy Hochul signed Chapter 56 of the laws of 2022 relating to the New York State budget for the 2022-2023 state fiscal year. Included in the bill at Part WW was an amendment to the open meetings law. The amendment was intended to expand, in extraordinary circumstances only, the ability of public bodies to meet using remote access technology. The Committee on Open Government has advised that each public body that wishes to allow for remote attendance by its members at locations that do not allow for in-person physical attendance by the public must adopt a resolution authorizing such remote attendance and must establish written procedures that set forth what they determine to be, quote, extraordinary circumstances, end quote. The open meetings law includes a exhaustive list of examples of such circumstances, including disability, illness, caregiving responsibilities, or any other significant or unexpected factor or event which precludes the member's physical attendance at such meeting. The Committee on Open Government established a model resolution to guide agency consideration. The proposed commission resolution faithfully tracks that model. Written procedures consistent with the Committee on Open Government's model, will be created as well.
Open Meeting Law 103-2A requires a public body to consider adoption of such resolution following a public hearing. For the purposes of satisfying that requirement, I hereby declare this section of today's meeting in session as a public hearing for the purpose of receiving public comment on the proposed resolution to allow members to attend commission meetings by video conferencing under extraordinary circumstances. May I have a motion to commence the public hearing?
So moved.
Any discussion? In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are in public hearing session. Now, are there any members of the public that wish to address this issue? I'll wait for another 20 minutes. Hearing having none, may I have a motion to close this public hearing?
So moved.
Opposed? Before us, a resolution that would authorize members to attend commission meetings by video conferencing under extraordinary circumstances. Any questions? May I have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Any discussion? Hearing none. In favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion is carried. New and old business.
The Breeders' Cup is upon us, Mr. Chairman.
It is indeed.
It is. Do we have any New York breds we care about?
Not really.
No?
Not biggest steer. But there's a classic, a horse named Flightline running, who.
He's running the classic, yeah, run the Met Mile, right?
Yeah, and, yeah.
Hole in the wind, right? Yeah.
He looked like a vegetarian.
He was awesome. Yeah, the Met Mile was awesome.
California.
Okay, yeah, it was even better.
Looking forward to that. I did want to give the commissioners a little update on a few things that I've been working on. The governor has graciously appointed me as chair of the two funds, and I have been at the meeting of one, and we've done both. Obviously, there's a lot of concern that the number of horses being bred in New York is going down, mares being bred. The breeding is not going as well as it ought to be. I am asking both funds in the future to come up with new and exciting proposals for us to look at, because obviously to continue what we're doing is not what we should be doing, considering that obviously things are not going as well as they ought to be. To give the commissioners some word on the, some of you may have heard that we have a proposal for 3 new casinos, I know that the staff is working with the Siting Commission to propose a new, which is due by January, new request for information that will go out shortly thereafter. I'm working with them, and as I said, I think, our really excellent staff under Mr. Williams are in the middle of doing that, and I think we'll be on time for that as well. Again, there's been a lot of discussion, and we've all seen it in the press, about some people having a leg up or that being favored or anything. I can assure the commissioners and the general public that nothing could be further from the truth, that this is going to be in the hands of the Siting Commission. Neither the governor's office nor anybody has put any pressure on us or them to come up with any specific casino or licensing. On the contrary, everybody has been told that this is going to be a fair and open process, and it will be. Finally, I have asked, beginning with our January meeting, Mr. Williams, our executive director, to start the meeting with a brief report to the commissioners on the activities of the staff in the following, before the meeting, and in particular where there are issues that are coming before the board, for us to see the board, specific individuals, the department heads, to bring it before that we can, one, see them and they can see us and their work be recognized. Thank you, and I thank Mr. Williams and the staff for their extensive education to a brand-new commissioner, and beg their indulgence. I hope to be here many years. They won't have to repeat this over and over again. So I thank you all, and I thank the commissioners for their promptness in coming to this meeting. With that, unless I hear anything more, I'll get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.